On March 3rd, on town meeting day, there will be a general election, and either this man to my left, Kevin Mullin, former alderman, or this man to my right, Jeffrey Wennberg, the current city planner, will be the 30th mayor of the city of Rutland. We have with us tonight several area media representatives who will be questioning the candidates, and they are from WCAX, Kathy Hughes, from the Rutland Herald, Monica Allen, from WSYB, Bruce Edwards, and from WNNE, Dan Leonard. We'll start tonight's format with an opening statement from each candidate, and by virtue of a coin toss, Mr. Mullin is our first candidate.
Thank you very much. Basically, the main thrust of the Mullin campaign this year is that we want to protect the tax dollar for the citizens, for the people in the city of Rutland. The next year will not be an easy year for whoever's in the mayor's office. We're at 95% of our charter limit. We're facing a cut, an elimination of federal revenue sharing dollars. This past year, $236,250 was used for tax stabilization purposes from the revenue sharing account. Some of that money, over $100,000 went into the fire payroll, over $100,000 went into the police payroll, and about $19,000 went into the recreation payroll. And that money is going to have to be made up from other areas, and those other areas are going to mean that we're going to have to take a close look at all services that the city of Rutland provides. And so that whoever's in the mayor's office is not going to have an easy task in the upcoming budget process. I think that what it's going to take is going to take a thorough analysis of all areas of city government. We're going to have to look to reduce inefficiencies, make certain operations more efficient, and we're going to have to look at certain areas for cutbacks. And it will not be an easy time. The city treasurer has projected that the charter limit would have to be exceeded by anywhere from 4 to 11 cents if we were to assume a planned budget in lines with what has taken place in the last couple of years in the city of Rutland. So it's going to be a time for austerity, and I think that that's the main thrust of my campaign, is trying to protect the taxpayers of the city of Rutland. And I think that I'm capable of doing this. I've been on the Board of Aldermen for 4 years. 3 of those years were on the Finance Committee. I served as Vice Chairman of the Finance Committee. My background in the private sector, having my own business, has certainly shown me the budget process thoroughly. And I look forward to trying to work very diligently for the taxpayers here in the city of Rutland.
Thank you, Mr. Mullin. Mr. Wennberg?
Thank you. Throughout this campaign, I've taken these introductory minutes to recite my background and qualifications. I've pointed out my master's degree in management and my work as a management consultant. I've listed my employment history from being the first assistant manager of the bus to a private solar energy contractor to the Southern Vermont office manager for Congressman Jeffords to my current position as Rutland City Planning Coordinator and Mayoral Assistant. I've spoken of my years on the City School Board and 2 years as its president, and I have recited the initiatives which I put forward that are today saving the taxpayers hundreds of thousands of dollars a year. Tonight, however, I would like to focus on a single area: leadership. It might sound trite, but the truth often does. Rutland City desperately needs leadership. Throughout this campaign, I have identified issues and taken positions. Some of these positions have been challenged by my opponent and by some of his political backers. That is as it should be. If I cannot defend my positions, then my effectiveness as mayor could be called into question. The position, the ability to articulate it, and the ability to defend it are all measures of leadership. I have put forward a very specific position on the Vicon Resource Recovery Plant. I believe we must build it, we must test it, and we must watch it like a hawk, but we must do all of this without delay. I've pointed out that some of Kevin's political backers are the same people who I believe are working diligently to kill this plant. From the taxpayer standpoint, this is the most important issue we face. In about a year, our landfill will have to close. If the Vicon plant is not online, our costs to dispose of trash will rise to astronomical proportions. Despite comments made by others, Kevin has yet to take a clear position on Vicon. He recently said that the question regarding the reopening of a permit for the plant was moot and was not relevant to this campaign. He is mistaken. The actions the next mayor will take concerning this permit and key appointments to the Solid Waste District Board of Supervisors may well determine the fate of this project and the costs we will bear to dispose of our trash. Can the taxpayers of Rutland afford to elect a mayor whose position on this critical issue is not clearly defined? Another measure of leadership is judgment. In other words, have past decisions proven to be the right ones? A year and a half ago, when I started as planning coordinator, I seriously questioned the wisdom of encouraging the development of the Commons shopping mall north of the city. I was the first to point out that cut-through traffic in our northeast and northwest neighborhoods would irreparably alter the character of those neighborhoods. I opposed and continue to oppose the Commons on this and other bases. Kevin was the principal proponent for the Commons on the Board of Aldermen and was serving as board president when they voted to support the project without proper deliberation and without public notice. He even voted against my proposal to hire a traffic consultant who would tell us what the real traffic impacts would be. Today he says he supports a downtown mall. Better late than never. But can the taxpayers and the residents of the northern half of this city afford to elect a mayor who once maintained such a position? The final measure of leadership is effectiveness. To be an effective mayor, I believe you must be independent. The mayor must be able to shun the special interest and willing to challenge the actions of the Board of Aldermen when public interest demands it. Effective leadership is a delicate combination of communication, compromise, and clout. If I'm going to be successful as mayor, I must be able to use the first two and willing to use the last. I believe, and I submit for the voters' consideration, the results of my 2 terms as president of the Rutland School Board as proof of my effectiveness as a leader. I believe that record, plus the record of my 1.5 years as planning coordinator and mayoral assistant, prove that in every critical case, my judgment was sound. And I believe that those records and the record of this campaign clearly show that I have been willing to make decisions, take positions, and defend them. Rutland needs a good manager, but we need more than that. Rutland needs a full-time mayor, but we need more than that. We need a leader who will move into the mayor's office and take charge. That is the kind of mayor I propose to be.
Thank you, Mr. Wennberg. We'll take a short break and we'll be back with the questioning from the panelists.
How are we going to do the questioning?
I'm going to start with Dan and go right through.
Okay.
You only have 15 seconds to ask each question.
Whoever you'd like to, you can direct your questions to. There's no set order or anything like that.
And can we do follow-ups, like if they're
Sure.
a little vague?
Yeah.
But not if we're allowed to.
There's a cute that's
10 seconds.
Okay, we'll open up the panelists' questioning to Dan Leonard from WNNE.
Thank you, Randy. I will address my first question to Mr. Mullin. In Mr. Wennberg's opening remarks, he mentioned the Act 248 permit from the Public Service Commission, which was granted a couple of years ago, and now is the aldermen are trying or hoping or looking into reopening that permit process for the Vicon waste-to-energy plant. I'd like to know what your stand on that position is. Do you think that permit process should be reopened, and why?
I thank you for asking me the question because it gives me a chance to rebut a little bit of what Jeff has said in his opening remarks. First of all, my position on Vicon has been clear. I'm a supporter of the resource recovery project. I have certain questions. Now, if I had been mayor, I would have done exactly what Jack Daly did and veto the first request to go to 248. For the benefit of the people that are watching that don't know what 248 is, 248 is not an act, it's a section of Title 30. And what it relates to is power companies don't have to go through Act 250. They go through a 248 process where they go to the Public Service Board and are granted a certificate of public good. And they examine many different areas. And I think that Mayor Daley did the appropriate thing in vetoing the first request of 248. I think that under my administration there would not have been a need to even consider Section 248 because we would have aggressively sought the answers to the questions that are plaguing this project. And I understand the frustration that the Board of Aldermen has had with that, and I can understand why they did what they did. But on the same token, I don't think that it was a necessary step to solve the problems that they wish to have addressed.
Mr. Wennberg, would you like to add anything to that?
Well, again, I don't believe your question was directly answered. My position, which I've said over and over again, is that I believe the 248 permit should not be reopened. I believe it is totally unnecessary from a standpoint of protecting either the taxpayers or ensuring that questions, quote unquote, are answered. It's the wrong avenue to use for that purpose. I personally believe that the reopening of the permit is a delaying tactic at the very least on the part of individuals and groups who would like to see this plant abandoned or stopped one way or another. I do not support it. I understand the questions, and I believe by and large we either have the answers already in our own hands or the questions cannot be answered through this process and must go to some other process for the appropriate answers.
Thank you. Would you like to follow up on that at all?
Okay, I'll send it back to Mr. Mullin. Is this a delaying tactic by the Board of Aldermen? Are they delaying this, or are there, in your opinion, that many unanswered questions?
I don't believe for 1 minute that the intent of the Board of Aldermen is to try to delay or to try to obstruct this project. I think that the board legitimately wants to have some answers met, and that's the reason why they went through this process and did what they did. And I really question Jeff's attempts to try to paint the Board of Aldermen as obstructionists, and what they were trying to do is protect the interests of the taxpayers of the city of Rutland.
Thank you. Bruce Edwards, WSYB.
Thank you. My question is for Jeff Wennberg. You mentioned in your remarks that Rutland is in desperate need of leadership. Over the last few years during the Daley administration, during his tenure as mayor, he's been criticized for a lack of leadership. If that is the case, as the city planner in the Daley administration for the past 18 months, why haven't you spoken up about this, what I interpret as a lack of leadership on his part over the last 18 months since you've been city planner?
Well, I'm sure you understand, Bruce, that I serve at the pleasure of the mayor as planning coordinator. I am his appointee, and my agenda, the schedule that I follow, the items and so forth that I address in my day-to-day work are pretty much at his discretion within the limits of the job description and so forth. It certainly would be thoroughly inappropriate and I think also somewhat short-sighted to criticize the gentleman for whom I'm working on such a broad base. And my comments, I think, as my entire campaign, quite frankly, are aimed at the needs of the city now and into the future. I see the need for leadership now and into the future. I see poor decision-making, quite frankly, on the part of the Board of Aldermen, and I see a certain lack of direction among some of the department heads. I think leadership in the mayor's office is desperately what's needed in order to provide that. I'm not going to condemn or criticize the gentleman for whom I work. I have a tremendous amount of respect for Jack Daley, and I think that under very trying circumstances he has done an excellent job. My style, my approach, my agenda will be different, and I think that's what I'm trying to get across in this campaign.
Could I just follow up on that? But isn't your responsibility also to the taxpayer of the city of Rutland? And if there has been a lack of leadership, you speak of being an independent mayor. Has this not your lack of criticism, if it's justified, shown a lack of independence on your part?
What takes place between the mayor and the planning coordinator in the mayor's office in terms of discussions, strategy, critique, and so forth belongs there, quite frankly. I believe the statement, the strongest statement in answer of your question, is the fact that I am a candidate for mayor today. I believe that statement, probably more than anything else, supports the comments that I'm making. I don't think I would offer myself, I would hope people would understand that I would not offer myself as a candidate if I did not see a need that I felt that I could fill. And I'm concerned about the future. I see tremendous problems, I see challenges ahead, but I believe that my background and my experience in City Hall and outside of City Hall, and my leadership experience on the school board, all augur well for my chances of being the kind of leader that I think this city needs.
Mr. Mullin, would you like to comment anything on that?
No rebuttal.
Okay, next we'll go to Monica Allen from the Rutland Herald.
My question's for Kevin Mullin. Today, it was announced, or actually last night it was announced that a company from Leonard Company is has bought out a large portion of the Commons project. And it seems to be a good sign for that project. It seems like that sort of breathed some life into that project. What would be your position as mayor on that project? What would you ask your community development department to do, and be specific if possible?
Well, I don't think the proper place for that is with my community development department. I think the proper place for that is with my city legal staff. And I think that what we have to do is not work to be obstructionists and try to tell other towns what they can and cannot have, but we have to work to protect what we have. And I would ask our city legal department to make sure that traffic problems are addressed, to make sure that we are not going to be adversely affected by any project that occurs outside of our borders, and to try to work to protect the interests of everyone in the city of Rutland.
Can I follow up on that? About 2 years ago, you supported the Commons project under the owners who were the owners at that time, and wanted to give it a $3 million grant in exchange for some annual money coming into the downtown. Why have you seemingly changed your position on that to be more, it seems more in line with Wennberg's position on this, on the malls?
Absolutely not. My position hasn't changed. My position on the Commons was this. We had several potential developments that were being brought forth into the area. There was talk of a strip center across from the Rutland Mall. There was talk of the Rutland Mall expansion. There was talk of Chase Properties doing something with the King Shopping Plaza. There was the talk of the Commons. It became clear and obvious to myself and others included that some development was going to occur within the Rutland region. And the thing that we wanted to see happen was have a development that would occur that would bring in new shoppers to the Rutland region. And we felt that strip centers were not the way that was going to bring in new shoppers to the Rutland region, or in addition to the Rutland Mall was not the way. We felt that to bring in new shoppers to the area, we would need something that was upscale, that had proper landscape architecture, that had proper interior architecture with atriums and the like, that would attract people from Glens Falls, from Burlington, and from other towns to come and spend a day in Rutland. And what we had done specifically with the people at the Commons was they had offered to work cooperatively with the downtown business district with shuttle buses and things of that nature, joint promotions, and they also offered to file for a UDAG grant, and that money would have been paid back to the city to establish an economic development fund. And that money would not have gone back to the federal government, but would have come back into the city coffers, and that money would have been able to be loaned out again to other business ventures. Specifically, what we had in mind was business downtown, whether it be a new department store, a new hotel, or what have you. And we took that one step further, and we got a commitment from the developers of the then project to say, look, if the grant doesn't come through, we'll pay you $100,000 a year into that economic development fund, and we'll work cooperatively with you, to make this a better region as a whole and bring in new dollars. What I do not want to see happen is I don't want to see development occur that's just going to take away from the same market that we have now and just whittle away at the pie, because that's going to hurt the existing businesses. And what I want to see is development that's going to occur that's going to bring in new people to our region and bring in new dollars that are going to be spent throughout our region.
Would you like to follow up on that?
Yes, very much. I think what Kevin has just outlined is a description of an economic development program which would result in economic suicide for the city of Rutland. It sounds very good, bringing in new shoppers, expanding the market, all the arguments that the developers of the Commons put forward in their original proposal. Those arguments were not rebutted. They were not checked. They were not investigated until I became the planning coordinator of this city. The question of traffic impacts because of the location, horrendous location of this proposal, were never even questioned. As a result, you must understand, now remember now, we had a Board of Aldermen with a clear majority favoring this development. And over a good deal of time, with communication, compromise, and very little clout in the planning coordinator's office, I was able to convince a majority of the Board of Aldermen to instead question some of these assumptions. Now those questions were turned into $1,200, a very small sum of money when compared to the magnitude of the impacts that we would see, which resulted in this study. I'm not going to read it, and I'm not even going to cite from it, but this study is called Review of the Commons of Rutland Town Traffic Studies. This study, for the first time, answered in an impartial way what the impacts on traffic and on the residential neighborhoods and on key intersections in the city of Rutland would be. That study came about as a result of my efforts, the efforts of a committee called the Impact Committee, and I might say over the objections of Mr. Mullin at the time. He was not concerned at that time with getting answers for our residents as to what the impacts of this project would be. And I'm glad to see that although he's a Johnny-come-lately, at least he's beginning to realize that you can't buy on faith what the developers necessarily may be proposing as what their project will or will not do to your community.
Thank you.
Can I just ask Jeff a question while we're on this
Yes,
question?
sure.
The same question, basically. What would your position as mayor be? What would you direct your planning, community development, or legal department to take? What would you direct them to take?
Okay, I can give you a very specific answer. As a result of this study, now I will cite things that you followed up. You'll regret asking that question because I'm going to give you some numbers now. Commons, as it first was proposed, and I understand that they're maybe doing some tinkering with it, but it was talking about 22,000 additional trips per day, vehicles on our streets per day, 40,000 a day at peak periods. That's an 80% of those vehicles will be using Rutland City streets, and 20% increase in traffic at the major intersections, especially along Main Street and at Woodstock Avenue. 20% increase in traffic as a result of that single development. That translates into an additional 20-second delay, on average, not peak, but on average, an additional 20-second delay in trying to get through the intersections at Main Street at Woodstock and Main Street at West Street. These are answers that came about as a result of asking questions and demanding impartial answers from people who were working for the city as opposed to for the development. In addition, we have questions, similar questions regarding the Rutland Mall expansion and regarding the economic impact, the financial impact on the taxpayers of the city, not just the residents of the northern half of the city, but the taxpayers overall in terms of lost property tax base in the city. The impact of the Rutland Mall is estimated to be somewhere in the vicinity of $100,000 a year that the property taxpayers, residential and other property taxpayers of the city would have to cough up because of lost property tax revenues as a result of the expansion of the Rutland Mall, a substantially smaller proposal. So, I think the answer to your question is very easy. If I am elected mayor, I will oppose the Commons. I will use whatever authority and clout that comes with that office to make sure that, number one, that project does not go forward as it is currently conceived. Number two, that if it does go forward, that the taxpayers of this city do not get saddled with the bill and the social consequences of having substantial amounts of cut-through traffic, quite frankly, destroy the residential nature of the northern half of this city. That is what I would do.
Okay. I'm not satisfied yet with Kevin's answer on what he would do. I really want something more specific if possible. And what would you do about the Commons as mayor? Be specific. Would you oppose it? Would you support it?
I would not say that I would be in favor or against it. What I would say, Monica, is I would protect the taxpayers of the city of Rutland and make sure that they are not adversely affected. I would use traffic data generated by studies to make sure that that was put forth, that any hearings that they had to go forward to, and put the onus upon them to rectify the situation and make it so that they are not affecting our traffic and that they are not affecting the city of Rutland in any way.
If it met that criteria that you stated, that it brought in new shoppers, new people, would you support it? Would you, if you could get these other issues dealt with, would you be a supporter of it, as you have been in the past?
Probably not, because of the fact that we will not have revenue coming in to work to do the changes that we need done in downtown Rutland. What I would rather see done, and this falls back upon Jeff too. In the last year and a half that he's been city planner, I question what department stores has he been to see to try to bring them into downtown Rutland? What has he done to help downtown Rutland? Jeff's position is that a good offense is a strong defense. My position is that the best defense is a strong offense, and what we have to do is stop our negative attitude and work to build a better downtown. Make downtown dynamic. Make it competitive.
Can I repeat?
I think we'll move along. Catherine Hughes from WCAX.
My question will be for Kevin. In your opinion, what is your opponent's single biggest weakness? And please be specific.
Kathy, when I announced for mayor, I said I was going to be running for the office. And I wanted to put forth the issues and talk about the city of Rutland's future. And I really would hate to get into a discussion of Jeff's weaknesses or his abilities.
But you're not saying that he doesn't have any weaknesses?
I'm not saying that he doesn't have any weaknesses. I guess, it's got to that point where I guess probably I'll answer the question. I guess his biggest weakness is his inability to work with people towards a common goal. And government is not a me process. Government is a we process. You have to work with other people. And I think I've demonstrated in the years that I was on the board that I had the ability to work with other people. And I feel confident that I can work with the administrative staff, that I can work with the private sector, that I can work with the Board of Aldermen to get things done. And that's what's needed. We have to start getting things done. We have to get results for the city of Rutland.
Can you give me an example of Mr. Wennberg's inability to work with people?
We have yet to see guidelines put forward on the $250,000 economic development fund that was set up, and Jeff's response to that is that he has trouble working with the Community Development Committee of the Board of Aldermen. There's an example right there. That money's sitting there and it could be used to do things for downtown Rutland.
Jeff, if you'd like to briefly follow up on that.
Well, okay, where do I start? Regarding the example, we'll speak specifically to the example. I have never claimed that my inability to work with the Community Development Committee of the Board of Aldermen has obstructed the Economic Development Fund. My answer on Bruce's, to that question, on Bruce's radio debate very recently, was very simply that the Agency of Development and Community Affairs has just now promulgated their second draft proposal for the grant program that is going to be used to leverage, hopefully, to leverage the $250,000 against state money. $250,000 is not a lot of money in terms of a revolving loan fund. It sounds like a lot, but when you get out there into the needs of the community, it isn't that substantial. So the proposal, and quite frankly the directive that I received from Mayor Daley, was this fund must be eligible, and we must do everything we can to make sure that we use the local money to attract as much state or federal money so that we get a serious chunk of change that can work for this community. The reason you haven't seen, and I answered this question before, and you obviously weren't paying close attention, the reason you haven't seen the results of a design for that fund that the Agency of Development and Community Affairs hasn't had a grant round in over half a year. Actually, I think it's approaching a year now. They are in a total program redesign. If we were to assume what they would be looking for in terms of a grant program and design our revolving loan fund prematurely, we could squander the opportunity we have now to get those state dollars. The prudent course, the one that the mayor's directed me to follow and the one that I fully support, is to wait, determine what program, what it is that the state of Vermont is looking for in terms of applications, and then design our program so that it meets those expectations and has a better chance at attracting those out-of-town dollars. Regarding the general statement that I am somehow unable or have some problem working with people, again, I cite the school board experience and a leadership role. I ask you to talk to the people that I served with on the school board. I ask you to talk to the people in the union representatives that I was involved in negotiations with. I ask you to talk to the administration, and I ask you to talk to the parents who remember my service there. I don't think you're going to get the same impression that Mr. Mullin is trying to convey. In terms of dealing in City Hall, again, talk to the department heads, and I bring to you as an example of my ability to work with people the fact that I have not brought a single initiative to the Board of Aldermen that has been rejected in the year and a half that I've been there. I brought a number of proposals to the board, a number of substantial proposals to the board, the Economic Development Fund being perhaps one of the most dramatic, and the case of the Commons reversal, one of the most convincing, that indeed I am able to work with people, I'm able to convince them of my point of view and to get things done.
Okay, at this juncture, we'll take a short break, and then we'll be back to resume the questioning with Dan Leonard.
Do we have to go like this in the mail?
Okay, we'll resume tonight's questioning with Dan Leonard.
I'd just like to get back to the question we had before the break. It seems sometimes when one candidate is asked to name deficiencies of his opponent, that question can often be turned around and make the person answering the question look like he's picking on his opponent. So we'll give Mr. Wennberg the opportunity to name Mr. Mullin's deficiencies, and then I'd like to Mr. Mullin to respond to those.
Okay, I think the question that he answered was the single. I have no intention of creating a list. The single question that I have regarding Kevin is proven leadership experience. Kevin has proven, and I think in very fine fashion, that he's a good and capable manager of movie theaters. That, there's no question about that. He was a good and hardworking member of the Board of Aldermen. I served as planning coordinator while he was on the Board of Aldermen. I will state that unequivocally. But in terms of leadership positions, I do not have, I don't think the record shows, that Kevin has that experience, comparable to my experience as president of the school board.
Well, I'd really like the opportunity to rebut that because as president of the school board, Jeff was the equivalent of being president of the Board of Aldermen in the school side of city government. And they have a school superintendent who handles the daily operations, who is the chief executive officer of the school system and handles the day-to-day aspects of that. In my business, I have 59 employees, we have 8 locations, we're in 3 states. We started out with a business that had failed with the 2 previous operators. Through careful business management, we turned that business around. We're now a $3 million operation, and we're proud of what we've done. And my business is a day-to-day thing, and I use my leadership on a daily basis with the existing staff that I have through the management levels in my organization. And Jeff, experience on the school board was very worthy, and nobody can criticize that. But being the president of the school board, is not equivalent to being mayor of the city of Rutland. And there's a big difference.
Okay, thank you. We'll go to Bruce Edwards.
I'd like to follow up on the question of the Commons Mall, specifically of development in Rutland Town. Jeff, it sounds as if, barring small developments, you'd be opposed to any medium or large-scale retail development in Rutland Town. Are we going to thwart all retail development in Rutland Town that doesn't suit the city? And as a second part of that question, you're in favor, for lack of industrial interest in the Old House Scale project, of turning the Old House Scale project into property into retail space, maybe a mall-type development. Couldn't the House Scale project, if developed along those lines, adversely impact the downtown area? In other words, you're robbing Peter to pay Paul?
Okay, 2 very good questions. First of all, regarding the general overall thrust of attitudes regarding commercial development in the town, I think that the answer to that obviously has to be no. I'm not opposed to everything just because it's in Rutland Town. That doesn't, there's record down there regarding proposals that have been brought forward that in my capacity as planning coordinator that we have quite frankly supported. The Heritage Hill housing development, for example. The Commons is in a terrible location. It is of a magnitude that is unjustifiable given the size of the market, and there is absolutely no justification for the belief, much less the assumption, that the market could grow in any reasonable fashion and that amount and quantity of space could absorb that without devastating the commercial tax base of the city of Rutland. So my position there is reasonably clear. concerning other ones, there are other proposals that may come up in other locations of different magnitudes. There are far better locations in Rutland Town for that kind of development than that one. That is one of the most horrendous imaginable.
But you also have problems with the Rutland Mall expansion.
For different reasons. For different reasons. The Rutland Mall expansion does not threaten the central business district in any mortal sense. It doesn't present the same degree of impact on property taxpayers as a result of lost property tax revenues in the central business district. That may or may not be sufficient justification for opposing it. I don't think it is on the face of it from the information we've developed ourselves. But the problem with the Rutland Mall is, again, its location and its total dependency on Woodstock Avenue, which our studies and our information clearly shows is operating at capacity today. And incremental growth in that location, whether it be the mall or the Bella Vista development across the street, is going to demand substantial investments on the part of private sector, or the public sector, excuse me, in Woodstock Avenue and improvements in Main Street and other intersections, which I think is completely inappropriate for the taxpayers of this city to pay. That's not the same thing as saying that the mall shouldn't expand. I'm just saying that the taxpayers shouldn't have to pay the millions of dollars that will be necessary to accommodate that expansion. Other developments have to be weighed on their particular merits and weaknesses depending on location, size, nature. And you'd have to present a specific to me before I could tell you how I feel about it. Regarding the house scale project, my support or favor for Mr. Blank's proposal is a reaction to the reality of the marketplace. You've mentioned robbing Peter to pay Paul. I think we have far more ability in City Hall to make sure that a development within the city, adjacent to the downtown, does not hurt the downtown than we would over any development that could be proposed in Rutland Town. We have far more control over the nature of that development. And secondly, if that were to be the case, and I'm not saying that it is, I believe it is not, but even if it were to be the case, it is better from a standpoint of the city taxpayers that at least the new investment and the taxes that are generated by that new investment is located within the city limits. So,
Thank you. Mr. Mullin, would you like to add anything to that?
Yes, I would. You know, I know for a fact that many people from the Rutland region go to other areas. They go to Holyoke, they go to Crossgates in Albany, they go to Burlington. And shopping has become a recreational event. People go and they spend a day. And I think that we can make the Rutland region a place where people will come to our region and spend a day and spend their dollars made in other areas in our region that are going to be regenerated in our region. And I go back to the statement that I still believe that our best defense is a strong offense, and we have to stop worrying about what's going on outside our borders and work on what is going on inside our borders and make things happen. And I bring back the question, Jeff, that I asked earlier, which you did not answer. What department store have you been to see to try to locate in downtown Rutland? Have you been to one? Previous city planners have. Have you?
Thank you. We'll move on to Monica Allen.
Okay,
I'll give her an opportunity that I can't answer.
okay. Kevin, in your own business, well, in your campaign, you have spoken of a commitment to trying to work on this good defense by working on the downtown. But in your own business, as a movie theater owner, you have moved movie theaters out of the downtown. Your movie theaters are located in malls. How do these two beliefs jive? It almost seems like you have a commitment to malls, and now you're putting on this political commitment to the downtown. It doesn't seem, I mean, some people doubt it.
Monica, I made a commitment to downtown Rutland when we invested the dollars to twin the Plaza Cinema. Now, the previous operators of the theaters in the Rutland area, both of them had gone under. The two older theaters were no longer viable to operate. They had to be shut down. Anybody that tried to operate those would have continued to lose money. That's obvious because nobody else came in and tried to reopen them to operate them. What had to be done...
Why weren't they viable?
Because they were ARPs, and the basic energy requirements that they needed could not be met. There's been a trend in our business away from the large theaters, and if you go anywhere across the country, you'll see this. You'll see that the trend has been to multiplexing and has been to smaller theaters by the very nature of the business. And we made a commitment and spent dollars twinning the Plaza Cinema and the downtown shopping plaza. When we had the opportunity to expand, we looked at areas. The space that was available for expansion at a reasonable rate good parking and so forth was at the Westway Cinemas. And so that's why we went over to West Rutland. And you know, I think it's an unfair attack to say that because I have businesses outside of the city of Rutland that I will not work for the interests of the city of Rutland, because I'm a taxpayer here. I own property here. My children are going to go to school here. And of course I'm concerned about our city, and I will work to protect our city. And one of the things that I will work very hard to do is to turn that particular plaza into a viable opportunity again. Right now it's decayed. There's a lack of tenants. Anybody that goes down there, they look at our downtown, they say, geez, you know, one half of downtown really looks nice. We've got these beautiful brick buildings. We spent a lot of money refacing. And there you've got the shopping plaza with the facade on the front of the Kmart and the different facades all the way down through. And it's obvious that we have to address that problem. We have to make our downtown more aesthetically sound and more viable. And we also have to address the parking situation.
Mr. Wennberg, would you like to add anything to that?
I'm not going to rebut that question, but I'd like to take the opportunity to answer the question Kevin asked a moment ago.
If you'd be brief, we're running out of time.
Okay. Number one, he made a very nice favorable comment about the condition of the historic building stock in downtown Rutland. I would like to thank Kevin for the compliment. I was the assistant grants administrator for the Historic Preservation Project in the late 1970s, which invested $350,000 of federal money into those structures, and I think as subsequent studies have shown, that contributed to the revitalization of downtown Rutland, and I am rather proud of my involvement with that project. In answer to his previous question, how many department stores have I visited, the answer is none. I haven't visited department stores. Department stores do not generally locate in singular locations. What I have been doing, and I'm sure Kevin is quite aware of this, is working for the last 9 months with the owners of the plaza to try to get them to do precisely what Kevin has been proposing. We have made some progress in that regard. I have had a number of meetings with them, and this project, I believe, is one that has a reasonably good chance of coming forward. I can't discuss it in detail because of the nature of the conversations that have taken place. But I can tell you that I support that proposal because I've been working on it for several months. In addition, I have been working with other developers, i.e. Mr. Blank, who are proposing to drop $20 to $30 million in the city in investment, which will come back and reduce our taxes, and protect, I believe, the city of Rutland from the kinds of parasitic developments, such as the Commons, that are being pursued right now.
Thank you. We'll move along to Catherine Hughes.
If possible, I'd like to follow up on something Monica started, but then I'd like to go off on a different topic, if it's possible.
We've got just
All
a
right.
few minutes, so
Well, we'll see how it goes.
we'll move along.
Kevin, you mentioned movie theaters, and you were responding to Monica's question about owning movie theaters and malls and making an effort to revitalize downtown at the same time. With that in mind, I can't resist bringing up the Paramount Theater, which you did own at one point in time, which has fallen into a state of disrepair, and it's now sort of useless. It's structurally questionable. And with that in mind, how do you respond to that?
How do I respond to what, Kathy?
Letting the Paramount Theater fall into disrepair when it could have been perhaps, maybe I'm not aware of all the facts, but it perhaps could have been turned into a viable structure downtown.
I think you've got to understand that we took over a situation that was a workout. We went in for the First Vermont Bank to try to straighten out a situation where the two previous operators had failed. We turned those situations around and made it viable. We sold the building at a loss to us. We paid the... You've got to understand, we assumed a building. When we took over the theaters, we assumed contracts that were in place from a previous operator. One of the things that we assumed was the ownership of that building. And we had to pay the taxes that the previous operator hadn't paid on the building to sell it, just so that we could get it off our hands because it was losing money for us. We sold it to a developer who we hoped would do something with that building to generate activity in downtown Rutland.
Do you look on that as a lost opportunity?
Do I look on upon the Paramount as a lost opportunity? No, I think that the Paramount Group now is working hard to get something going now. I don't see where the opportunity is lost. It's owned by a group of people in the city of Rutland who have a sincere desire to make that building go again.
Do I have time to launch into a new issue?
We're going to take a short break, and then we will come back and follow up with another question and some closing statements. So we'll be back in just a minute. Okay, we'll go back to Catherine Hughes for one more question.
I'd like to know from both of you, but I guess I might as well start with Jeff since I've been picking on Kevin. The voters are going to be addressing, one of the questions on the ballot is going to be binding arbitration. There's a question about rescinding it. Without getting into a lengthy explanation, I'd just like to know where both of you stand on the issue of binding arbitration. I guess I'll start with you.
Binding arbitration, when used properly by management, is a good, valuable tool, especially in the public sector, where it forces, or it enables, quite frankly, the various parties to the dispute to continue to work together through the process of seeking a resolution. I oppose the removal of binding arbitration. I would not enjoy serving as mayor unless we had binding arbitration.
Kevin?
Well, this is one area where Jeff and I are in total agreement, and there's no opposition whatsoever. I agree that binding arbitration is a useful tool, and I don't think that the problems that the city has been having with labor squabbles in the past are related to binding arbitration, but more related to a lack of understanding of labor law and labor relations.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, I guess we're going to wrap things up here. We're starting to run out of time, and we'll ask Mr. Wennberg for a closing statement.
Okay, thank you, Randy. I guess in summary, the message I would like to leave the voters is a message of leadership and a message of experience. In a recent radio debate, in answer to one of my questions, Kevin said that he had no experience in dealing with unions and had not had the occasion to work with unions or in a labor management situation with unions. That, I think, is a very serious deficiency. Right now, the city of Rutland is in the thrust, in the midst of negotiations with its three principal unions. Those contracts typically run out 3 years, a year beyond the first term of the next mayor. The decisions made in the first few months of the next mayor's term could well end up costing the taxpayers in terms of labor troubles, continued labor troubles, or tax dollars well beyond the period that that mayor may serve, that is 2 years. That, I think, is a serious concern. My experience as president of the school board was not only in terms of setting policy, but sitting down at the table with the negotiators, and actually in one case serving as the negotiator for the City of Rutland Department of Education with this principal union, the Rutland Education Association. That experience was positive. Ask the union leadership if you doubt it. Not only that, but my experience in that particular case dealt with not only the same union, but indeed the same local and the same negotiators. That 2 out of the 3 unions are now negotiating with the city for their collective bargaining agreements. I can move into the mayor's office without missing a beat. I am ready to be mayor, and I think that with leadership, the experience, and the balance and independence that I could bring to that office, that I believe the taxpayers' interests will be well protected for the next 2 years.
Thank you. Mr. Mullin.
Well, I guess to start off my closing statement, I'd have to rebut what Jeff said. Once again, he's distorted one of my positions. And what I said in relation to that is that in the private sector, I've had no dealings with unions because we do not have any in our business. However, Jeff, you know that as a member of the Board of Aldermen, I had several dealings with the unions. My first year on the board, I was on a union negotiating team that negotiated one of the contracts. And your experience is no more than mine in the area of dealing with city unions. In fact, I would have more experience dealing with the city unions, i.e. police, fire, and DPW, than you have. So I'll start my closing argument with that rebuttal. In closing, I'd just like to say this, that on Tuesday, March 3rd, voters of the city of Rutland are going to have a choice. They're going to have a choice in what direction they want to see the city of Rutland go in for the next 2 years. I have clearly put forth my stance on the positions in the areas in which I think the city has to move in. I think we have to take a very aggressive stance in developing in economic development and bringing in a broader tax base. We have to expand our tax base to alleviate the tax burden that is placed on the average taxpayers. There are people throughout this community that are considering moving outside of the city just because of their tax bills. And that's a very real problem. There are a lot of people living in the town now that are transplanted city residents for one reason only, and that's to escape paying the high burden of the property tax. And we have to work to make Rutland a livable place to live and work in. And we have a lot to be proud of in the city of Rutland, and I'm glad that I was able to be born and brought up in the Rutland area, and I'm real glad that I'm able to pursue a career in the Rutland area. I enjoyed my 4 years on the Board of Aldermen. I think it's prepared me very well to step into the office of mayor. I think my experience in the private sector, dealing with an annual budget of $3 million, dealing with 59 employees, dealing with expansion projects, enables me to be the type of mayor that the city of Rutland needs at this point to bring it forward in the next 2 years. Thank you.
Thank you. I guess that's going to do it for tonight. I'd like to thank our two candidates, Kevin Mullin and Jeff Wennberg. I'd also like to thank our panelists, Dan Leonard, Bruce Edwards, Monica Allen, and Catherine Hughes. I'd like to urge everyone in the city of Rutland on March 3rd to get out and vote. And that's going to do it for tonight. Good night.